The .NET framework is composed of following 4 components. This FCL is divided into 2 parts. One is base class library and another one is system. Whatever the data which is stored in the database and I want to retrieve that data. For that, I am going to use query language. Hello students, a warm welcome to my new session on Introduction to .NET Programming. I am Revati from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, first grade college, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the topics what I have discussed in my last session. So dear student, I have discussed what is C# programming. So here C# program is also called by the name object-oriented programming. So it is OOPS. It is an example for high-level programming. Then I have covered C#, a widely used professional language. That means why C# programming is used as a professional language. Along with that, I have discussed C# features or characteristics. Along with that, I have discussed the applications of C#. Along with that, I have discussed the difference or comparison between C and C# programming. So these are the certain topics I have covered in my last session. But in my today's session, I'm going to deal with .NET framework. Under that, I'm going to deal with CLR. That is Common Language Runtime. Along with that, I'm going to deal with FCL. That is Framework Class Library. Along with that, I'm going to deal with what is Windows Form and what is ASP.NET. So these are the certain topics I'm going to deal in my today's session. Now dear student, this .NET framework is very important topic from the examination point of view. So during my session, please make a point because this .NET framework is very important in order to understand C# programming. Now, my today's first topic here is .NET framework. That means to run my C# program, I required some platform. For that, I'm going to have .NET framework. So, if I consider this .NET framework, I can able to create Windows applications, I can able to create web applications, even I can able to create database applications because this .NET frameworks includes other programming. That is nothing but ASP.NET, Web.NET, ADO.NET and so on. So here .NET is a framework. It is mainly used to develop software application. It is a framework. It is a framework that includes other subframes. It's mainly used to develop software application and it is designed and developed by the Microsoft and the first version was introduced or released in the year 2000. Now, my question here is that what is the software I require to run C# program? So, dear student, please make a note here that to run C# program, I'm going to use Microsoft Visual Studio. Microsoft Visual Studio. Okay, so to run my application, I required Microsoft Visual Studio. So it is used to develop applications for web, along with that Windows and phones. That means this .NET framework is used to develop web applications, Windows applications, as well as phone application. So this framework contains a large number of libraries. So here .NET framework includes large number of library and it is known as framework class library, or it is called by the name FCL. F stands for framework, C stands for class, and L stands for library. So what is FCL? There is nothing but large number of library. So large number of class library. So it's going to have classes along with methods, along with objects. Okay. Together it is named as framework class library. Anyway, dear student, let's see the components of .NET framework. So, it is called framework class library. Now, this .NET framework, the software programs written in .NET are executed in the execution environment. That means, think that I have written some .NET application. To run that .NET application, I require some environment, and that is known as Common Language Runtime. So it is CLR. So here .NET framework includes FCL and CLR. So here FCL is nothing but framework class library. Framework class library, whereas CLR is nothing but common language runtime. These are the core and essential part of .NET framework. That means these two components are very important part of .NET framework. And this framework provides other services like memory management, networking, security, memory, and type safety. Along with FCL and CLR, this .NET framework is also provides the services like memory management. That means effectively manage the memory. Networking, that means inter-system connection. Then security along with type safety. Now, the .NET framework is composed of following 4 components. That means the .NET framework is made up of 4 components, that is common language runtime, framework class library, along with that core languages like Windows Form, Active Server Page, .NET and ADONET. Along with that, it includes some other forms like WCF, WPF, WF, card space, link queue, entity framework, parallel link queue, task parallel library, etc. So here the .NET framework is made up of 4 components. In that, the most famous one, common language runtime and framework class library. Anyway, dear student, let's discuss the component of .NET framework one by one. So at the beginning, I'm going to have common language runtime. So dear student, to load the program or to execute the program, I required some platform or some environment, and where I'm going to get the environment under CLR. Think that I have created prg1.net program. Now I want to compile this program, I want to execute this program. Along with that, I want to load this program. For that, I'm going to have common language runtime. So it is a program execution engine. So what is CLR? It is nothing but the program execution engine that is responsible for loading the program, executing the program, and it's also responsible for converting the program into native code. So what is the meaning of native code? For example, think that I have Windows 7 operating system. In that, I have Intel processor. Okay, now I'm going to run .NET program, and whatever the program I'm going to run and whatever the program I'm going to convert, that is with respect to Intel processor. If I consider another processor, for example, AMD processor, that is advanced micro device processor, and if I run my .NET program in that platform, then whatever the code I'm going to get, that is particular to that platform. So it is called native code. It acts as an interface between the framework and operating system. That means this execution engine is going to act like a interface or mediator between .NET framework and operating system, and it is responsible for exception handling. So what is exception handling? There is nothing but error handling. It's also responsible for memory management, and it's also responsible for garbage collection, and it provides security. Now I have my common language runtime. It includes base class library support. In that, I have thread support. That means to run all kind of threads. There is nothing but multi-threading concept. I have thread support. Then I have type checker. That means to check the data type, I have type checker. To manage the errors, I have exception manager. To debug my program, I have debug engine. To manage and to provide security, I have security engine. To convert the program into native code, I have native compilers. I have code manager. To manage garbage collection, I have garbage collector. Along with that, I have class loader, and this class loader is responsible for loading the classes as well as programs. Now I have my another component, that is framework class library. So as the name itself indicates that It includes classes. So it is a standard library that includes thousands of classes, and it is used to build a application. So it is mainly used to build an application. The base class library is the core of framework class library, and it is responsible for providing all kind of basic functionality, and this is the representation of FCL. So this FCL is divided into two parts. One is base class library and another one is system. Under my base class library, I have system web, that is for web applications. System.data, this is for database. For Windows form, I have Windows form. To design user interface, I have drawing. Once again, to develop my web applications, I'm having system.xml. So these are my base class libraries. And if I consider system, in my system, I have collections, configurations, input, output, network, security, service process, runtime, etc. So here this FCL, that is framework class library, includes thousands of classes to develop an application. Now I have my next component, WinForms. Suppose if I want to create Windows form, then I have WinForms. For example, think that I want to create one application form. I want to create one application form. In that, I have the fields like name, text box, address, text box, then register number, text box, 6. I have radio button, then I have button submit. Okay. To design this kind of Windows form, I required WinForms. So here, Windows form is a smart client technology. It's a smart client technology for the .NET framework. It is a set of managed library. That means it includes set of libraries that is responsible for specifying common application tasks such as reading, writing to the file system. So, WinForms are responsible for reading the content as well as writing the content to the file system. The next component I have ASP.NET. So what is this ASP.NET? That is nothing but active server page. So here ASP.NET is a web framework. That means to design my web applications, I'm going to use ASP.NET. So, it is a web framework designed and developed by the Microsoft. It is mainly used to design websites, web applications and web services. Along with that, it provides a fantastic integration of HTML, that is hypertext markup language, CSS, that is cascade style sheet, and JavaScript. That means to design my web applications or website or web services, I can able to make use of hypertext markup language or CSS and JavaScript. And it was first released in January 2002. Now, my next application here is ADONET. It is a module of .NET framework which is used to establish connection between application and data source. So, dear student, if I design any application, then I have front end and back end. If I consider front end, that is nothing but the user interface. Then what about back end? That is nothing but the database where I'm going to store the data. Now, to establish connection between front end and back end, I'm going to use ADONET. So here, .NET is a module of framework which is used to establish a connection between application and my data source. Data source can be such as SQL server or extensible markup language. ADO.NET consists of classes. That means it includes certain classes and it's mainly used to retrieve the data, connect the database, insert the data as well as delete the data. To establish connection between front end and back end, I'm going to use ADO.NET. The next component here is Windows Presentation Foundation. That is nothing but WPF. So, Windows Presentation Foundation is a graphical subsystem. So, what is WPF? It's nothing but the graphical subsystem which is supported by the Microsoft for rendering user interface. So, to create user interface, we are going to use Windows Presentation Foundation. Okay, so it is rendering user interface in Windows based application. Here, Windows Presentation Foundation, previously known as Avalon, was initially released as part of .NET framework. And what is the series here? It is 3.0 in the year 2006 and it is mainly used to provide user interface. So, what is user interface? To provide interaction between user and the system, we required user interface. For that, I'm going to have WPF and it uses DirectX. Now, the next component here is Windows Communication Foundation. So, it is a framework for building service-oriented application. To build or to design my own service-oriented application, then I'm going to use Windows Communication Foundation. Using Windows Communication Foundation, you can able to send the data as asynchronous message from one service end to another. That means by using WCF, you can able to send asynchronous data to the user. Then I have WF, that is Workflow Foundation. It's mainly used to represent the flow of work. So, Windows Workflow Foundation is a Microsoft technology and that provides an application program interface and in-process workflow engine. So, what is WF? It provides application program interface. Along with that, it provides in-process workflow engine and a rehostable designer to implement long runtime, that is long running process as workflows within .NET applications. The next component I have LINQ, that is language integrated query. So it is a query language. Dear student, as I discussed, .NET framework supports ADONET. It's mainly used to establish front-end and back-end connection. Once the data is stored at the back-end, now I want to retrieve the data. For that, I require some query. For that, I'm going to have language integrated query. It is a query language introduced in .NET 3.5 framework, and it is used to make the query. That means I'm going to send the request. So it's mainly used to make the query for data source with C# or Visual Basic Programming Language. That means whatever the data which is stored in the database and I want to retrieve that data. For that, I'm going to use query language. Now, let me to discuss the benefits of .NET application. So, memory management. By using .NET programming, we can able to manage the memory very effectively. So, here there are two types of data, value data type and reference data type. If I consider value data type, then it is represented by using stack. If I consider reference data type, and all the reference data types are stored in the heap memory. Now, .NET supports effective memory management. In many programming languages, programmers are possible for allocating and releasing memory. So, if I consider C program, we have static memory location. Along with that, we have dynamic memory location. That means users are able to allocate the memory and they are responsible for deallocating the memory. And if I go with .NET framework, here also user can able to allocate the memory based on their requirement and they are responsible for deallocating or releasing the memory. So, allocating and releasing memory and for handling object lifetime. In .NET framework application, the common language runtime provides these services on behalf of the application. So, what is the job of CLR? That is memory management. The next benefit here is common type system. In traditional programming languages, basic data types are defined by the compiler. That means if I consider C program, the basic data types are defined by the compiler. But if I go with .NET, the basic data types are defined by the .NET framework. For that reason, it is called common type system. So, this is the difference between other programming language and .NET programming language. Now, I have another benefit here is extensive class library. Dear student, when I talk about .NET, it supports or it have built-in or inbuilt classes tools. Okay, instead of having a vast amount of code to handle common low-level programming operation, programs can use a readily accessible library of types. That means for each and every program, instead of writing application or instead of writing same code, what we can able to do here, that we can able to use readily accessible classes as well as methods and their members from the .NET framework class library. Like C program, instead of writing same code, what we can able to do, we can able to use the predefined functions. Same thing, it's applicable here. That means instead of writing simple codes, simple applications, we can able to make use of existing classes and methods. Now, the next benefit here is that development frameworks and technology. So here .NET framework includes numbers of libraries. Libraries for specific areas of application development such as active server page or ADONET. That means suppose if I want to develop any database applications or Windows application or web service, then I can able to use the existing classes, methods from the library. So it supports development frameworks and it supports technology. So it includes vast number of libraries for specific areas of application. So what are the specific areas of application I have? That is ASP.NET, and this is for web page, website and web service. And here ADO.NET, this is for database connection. So it is nothing but data access and Windows communication foundation for service oriented applications. So these are the some of the benefits of the .NET framework. Anyway, dear student, in my today's session, I started with .NET framework. In that, I have discussed CLR, FCL. So that is Common Language Runtime and Framework Common Language. Along with that, I have discussed some of the benefits of the .NET approach. Anyway, dear student, in my next session, I am going to deal with structure of C# programming. Along with that, C# command line arguments. Anyway, dear students, let's meet in the next session with the more information about introduction to .NET programming. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.